Hey friends, it's a cold and miserable day, so I'm in my shop. It's a nice place to be. Now, I mentioned in my intro to turning video that you can create your own bowl blanks out of green wood. I also mentioned that for people new to the hobby, introductory turners, that it might not be the best investment. And instead just buy commercially prepared blanks. So one of the questions that I often see asked is, at what point does it make sense to make your own bowl blanks? And the answer to that question is really individual. I know veteran turners that might make a half dozen bowl blanks a year. And they're really picky about the wood that they save. They're really picky about the wood that kind of meets their bar. I know there are turners that are more like myself, that will turn anything they can chuck into a lathe. And so I go through a lot of wood. So I can't afford to be picky. If I was picky, I'd be spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on commercial bowl blanks. And my wife would probably murder me. So I like to make my own bowl blanks. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to take this log right here, and we're going to turn it into ideally 4 bowl blanks. But you never really know. And that's part of what I like about it, is you get to figure out what's in here, and then you see what you can do with it. So when you approach a log like this, there's a couple steps that we're going to go through. First and foremost, you look at the ends. The ends. And if the ends of the log are pithy, if they're soft, if they're irregular, if they're not more or less straight up and down, you're going to want to cut the ends off. Now, you can do this on a bandsaw. I like to use a chainsaw. And usually I'd be doing this out in my garage. But I want to film, and the lighting in my garage is terrible. So I'm going to cut the ends off this blank out in my garage. Then I'll come back and I'll show you the result. And then we'll move on to step 2, where we turn this log into what I like to refer to as rounds. So I'm back. And this is why we always put a fresh end on our logs. Let me show you. You see that crack? That wasn't visible until I cut the end off. So now what we have to do is keep chopping away slices till we get rid of that crack. And we've got the same problem on the other end. So I'll be right back. We'll see how much we have left. All right, I'm back. So, had to cut off about yay much off the one end to get rid of the crack. I've still got a tiny bit on the other end. I cut off about 1 inch there too. But honestly, we're running out of log. So I didn't want to cut too much more before I went back and talked about next steps. So let's do that now. This is the end of the log. Okay? You have your sapwood running around the outside. Your bark is obviously on the outside. Then comes your sapwood, then your heartwood, and at the very center, right here in the middle, is your pith. Now, pith is a wood turner's enemy. You want to remove this pith. And generally you want to remove 1 inch to 2 inches out of the center of a log. So before we actually make that cut to split this log in half and begin dividing it down into the shapes that will eventually become blanks, I want to take a look at this pith. And so if we're shooting to remove about 1 inch to 2 inches, we're going to want to remove about that much out of the center. Okay? Now, we've got this discoloration here, which might be really pretty in a bowl. So maybe instead of cutting this direction, maybe we cut this direction. We can also see we've got some cracking going on. This is the little bit of cracking that I couldn't get out. So this is a good chance to say, well, do I potentially want to remove the slice of my blank that has the crack? The other thing you can do at this point that I really like is you can start kind of planning your bowls. Let me give you an example. Let's say we're dealing with this portion of the wood. So basically from there over, okay? We can get, I mean, you can see, that's a bowl shape. You can see that. And then if we go to the other side, we've got a nice egg bottom shaped bowl right there. So you can start to plan out what the shapes of your bowls are gonna be while they're still in the log. Let's check the other side just to be safe. And we get the same. We've got our pith. We've got this discoloration coming out, which again, could be pretty, might just get turned away depending on where we put it in our blank. We could come in this way and have two shallow bowl blanks. We could cut this way and have one deep egg-shaped blank and one smaller blank. These are the things that you start to consider before you cut your logs apart. So I'm gonna make the initial cuts, take this apart, and I'll be right back. Okay, so we've cut that log in half, and I went right through the pith. Now, what I'm gonna do when I'm actually turning these on the lathe is I'll remove the top quarter to half an inch to smooth this out. And that'll get rid of the rest of the pith for me. If you're doing this on a bandsaw and you've got a much smaller kerf than if you have a chainsaw, you're gonna wanna do 2 passes with the bandsaw. And then you'll end up with a chunk of wood that looks something like that. That came out of another green blank that I processed down. Now, the next step, I have a circle template. This is a fantastic piece. You can get them off Amazon for only a couple of bucks. You can also use a compass. You can use a straight edge. If you're an artist and you can actually draw circles, more power to you. But what you want to do is you want to look on your log for things that you do or don't want to show up on your rim. So I don't really like this soft, mushy part. I'm not really a fan of this soft, mushy part here. But I'm okay with this, because if I can settle that in the middle of a bowl, I'll turn that away, and you'll just get this nice color pattern on the rim. So I've got about an 8-inch round, if I'm reading this right. Yep, so I've got about an 8-inch round, and so I'm gonna take about the 7.5, 8-inch mark, put it on the edge of that mushy part, because again, you want to give yourself a little bit of slip. And this is just simply a tapered bit that I use as a center holder. And then I'm going to find, we'll do 7.5, I think. We'll do 7.5, and you just simply draw your circle. Now, you're not going to get it perfect. You're just not. But you're going to get it close. And close, if I'm honest, is good enough, because we can then kind of come back and rough in the parts that we missed. Now, I don't really have the space to do a big bowl over here, but can I land something small? Nope. So it looks like it's just the one bowl blank out of this one. So let's skip to the next step. We'll cut this bowl blank out, and then off camera, I'll do the same thing with the other half of this log. All right, so after a few false starts, and throwing the blade off my bandsaw. Only once though. That rectangular chunk that you saw is now a bowl blank. Now, it's not perfectly circular. As you can see, it's got some rough edges, but it's bowl shaped. And that's the advantage. When I chuck this into a lathe, I'm not going to be hitting hard 90-degree corners at the edge of a rectangle. I'm going to be hitting oblique angles that are almost circular. There's also less material here to cover, which means for our next step, when we break out the anchor seal, there's going to be less to paint. Because that is, surprise, the next step. Now, this wood, this blank, it's wet. It's real wet. It's dripping wet. If I were to leave it dry in its current state, it would crack. And in cracking, I then have to do a whole bunch of work to fill those cracks, and at that point, it's basically firewood. It's a pain in the butt. But if you seal the wood, then it can dry slowly. And in drying slowly, it's much less likely to crack. So the next step, and I'm going to do this off camera because this video is running a little long, and frankly, watching me paint stuff is kind of boring. I'm going to use a product called Anchor Seal. You can catch it on Amazon. An Anchor Seal is a product designed for storing and drying bowl blanks. And if you want to get into turning, and you're lucky enough to have an American Association of Wood Turners or your regional equivalent chapter near you, go ahead and join, because most likely they'll sell Anchor Seal at a volume discount, which makes an already reasonably priced product far cheaper. So I'm going to go do a bunch more bowl prep. And next video, I got a surprise for you. But if you want to see what that surprise is, you got to subscribe. We'll catch you next time. Remember, it's always more fun to make sawdust with friends. Talk to you later.